It is humbling to be part of your poignant event, and I know that a lot of preparation goes into making sure that the programme accurately reflects a very dark period in history. Today also marks the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau and the largest Nazi concentration camp. It is therefore fitting that the theme of the Holocaust Memorial Day 2025 is for a better future. It provides an opportunity for people to come together, learn both from and about the past, and most importantly, take actions to make a better future for all. I know that across Glasgow schools, children and young people will have been studying different aspects of the Holocaust, as well as most recent conflicts against the background of human rights. It is vital that you, our youngest citizens, examine and reflect on these powerful experiences, exploring the consequences of war, and coming to the realisation that the peace some of us in the work happen to enjoy today is truly a fragile concept. It is more important than ever before that we heed the lessons of the past and strive for peace. I am very much looking forward to the speakers and thought-provoking performances this morning, and I will congratulate you all in advance for your sterling efforts. Thank you.
Thank you to the Lord Provost, Jacqueline McLaren, for her inspiring words on Holocaust Memorial Day. We are truly grateful for her presence and meaningful contribution to today's event. We are delighted to have St Timothy's Primary School perform a song that they have written that explores today's theme, For a Better Future.
A big thank you to St Timothy's Primary School for their performance of their powerful song on this year's Future for a Better Future. Now Lourdes Secondary School will perform a thought-provoking drama.
Each moment in life is precious. Precious moments are filled with the hope that there will be more precious moments. You feel that hope until those precious moments are no more. I used to live in a nice house.
We had a nice car. We went for picnics in the country.
I went to a good school. I was expected to do well. I had many good friends. We laughed and played.
I was good at sports. I was on the school team.
I was happy. My family was happy. Then the war came, and with the war came the Nazis. If we had known the future, we maybe could have done something.
We didn't know how long the journey would take.
And if we had known, who would have believed us? Who would have thought it was possible?
We made mistakes, small steps.
And with each step, there was no turning back.
This Holocaust Memorial Day marks the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi concentration camp, and the 30th anniversary of the genocide in Bosnia. Unfortunately, these are not solely events of the past, with so many individuals across the world facing hostility and persecution in their own communities today.
The theme of this Holocaust Memorial Day is for a better future, where the hope is that we, as the generation of the future, can have the opportunity to come together, learn both and about the past, and make for a better future for all of us.
There are many things we can all do to create a better future. The fourth thing we can do is
Learn for a better future!
Holocaust was an attempt by the Nazis to make our papers to destroy all Jewish people. It took place across many different countries. The active part of restoration of some citizens of those countries. Earlier for centuries, the land is prison, persecution of Jewish people began as soon as the Nazis took up the German countries left. The many people under us and then the same Jews. Judgment for German citizenship. Your first were yellow stars, a visual manifestation of religion, which escalated the dehumanization, polarization, persecution. Ultimately, it led to the extermination of 6 million Jewish people.
Fill in this registration form, a simple formality. Have you any Jewish grandparents? Next!
Fill in this registration form, a simple formality. Have you any Jewish grandparents? Next.
Take this identity card, keep it with you at all times. It's marked with a J for Jew.
Keep this identity card. Keep it with you all times. It's marked with a J for Jew. You're all right.
That's a good, that's a good, that's a good. What are you doing? I'm not your
across Amsterdam, Jews were disappearing. Mothers would go to shops, come back, and their families would vanish. Children would come home from schools to find their parents gone. Thousands of Jewish people were persecuted through these days.
In the spring of 1942, Anne Frank's father decided to take his family into hiding to avoid them being called up to service or being persecuted by the Nazis. He transformed the hiding place in the annex of his office building, and the family moved in. Before long, they were joined by 4 more people. The hiding place was cramped. Anne had to keep very quiet and was often afraid.
On her 13th birthday, just before they went into hiding, Anne was presented with a diary. During the 2 years in hiding, Anne wrote about the events in the secret annex, but also about her feelings and thoughts. In addition, she wrote short stories, started with a novel, and copied passages from books she read in her book of brief sentences. Writing helped her pass the time.
I can't believe it. Did he really just say that? A diary? Oh, I'm going to start writing tomorrow. Maybe I could do another small novel. The secret annex. You don't know how wonderful writing is unless you do it yourself. But I want to do more than that. I want to be useful when I'm joining people I haven't even met yet. I want to go to London and after my life.
Anne and her family were discovered on the 4th of August 1944 and arrayed on their hiding place and transported to concentration camps where Anne, her mother Edith, and sister Margot ultimately lost their lives. Her diary, which was discovered in the raid, was preserved and passed to her father Otto, the only member of the family to survive.
Anne's writing made a deep impression on Otto. He read that Anne had wanted to become a writer and a journalist, and that she had intended to publish her stories about life in the secret annex. Friends convinced Otto to publish the diary, and in June 1947, 3,000 copies of the secret annex were printed.
And that was not all. The book was later translated into around 70 languages and adapted for stage and screen. People all over the world were introduced to Anne's story. Otto hoped that readers of the diary would become aware of the dangers of discrimination, racism, and hate of Jews.
This Holocaust Memorial Day, we all have an opportunity to take action for a better future. A better future where people are not suffering prejudice or persecution because of their faith, ethnicity, or any other characteristic.
Together we must call out Holocaust or genocide denial and trivialisation when you see it or hear it.
Use reputable authoritative sources to learn more about the Holocaust and other genocides and to share our minds.
Report all hate crimes to the police and the relevant bodies.
If we'd known the future, maybe we could have done something.
We don't know when the journey will end.
Together, we must be the light and darkness.
For a better future.
A huge thank you to the people from Lourdes Secondary School for their impactful performance. We are now privileged to have the pupils from Notre High School with us today to share their insights from their learning from the Lessons from Auschwitz project.
We took part in the Lessons for Auschwitz project, where most importantly we got the chance to visit the concentration camps of Auschwitz and Birkenau, but we also got the chance to listen to a survivor's testimony about their experience in surviving the Holocaust, and also work in director-led focus groups to revisit our experience after the fact. Today we want to talk to you about our experience and hopefully encourage you to take part in the project if you ever get the opportunity to in the future.
The Holocaust is a term used to describe the murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazis and their collaborators. Whilst it's important to remember that there were other victims, for example the Roma Sinti people, It was only Jewish people who were targeted for complete destruction, which is why the Holocaust focuses on them. The Nazis built many camps, for example, built for different purposes, for example, labour, transportation and death, the most famous death camp being Auschwitz-Birkenau, which was one of the camps that we visited. These camps were built all across Europe. It is important to remember the statistics, but such a large number can be difficult to wrap your head around. The Nazis tried to dehumanise Jewish people, so by focusing on their stories and the lives of the victims, we can try to give back their humanity.
For this reason, we've decided to focus on Otto and Katerina Margolius, a Jewish couple from Prague. Otto was born in Prague, and Katerina was born in Austria. Katerina attended an art college in Vienna and then went on to work as a hat maker. Otto was a talented sportsman. He was a member of the national Czech field hockey team. He went on to win many awards in skating, figure skating and sprinting as a member of a prominent Jewish sports club. He also served in the Czech army and then after being discharged went on to work at his father's spirit distillery and wine distribution business. Katerina and Otto met in the late 1920s, were married in October 1930 and welcomed their daughter Ines a year later, who was born in Prague. Before World War II, approximately 55,000 Jewish people lived in Prague out of an estimated total of 350,000 living in Czechoslovakia. Like Otto and Katerina, many Jewish people played a big part in their local communities and cities. However, their religion was only part of who they were. Many considered their nationality, like being Czech or German, to be a larger part of their identity. Despite this, the Nazis persecuted them for their Jewish faith and singled them out.
By 1939, anti-Semitic laws had started to be introduced in Czechoslovakia, and these were laws which targeted Jewish people. An example of this is the Star of David, which is a badge that the Nazis forced Jews to wear so that they could be identified as Jewish. Looking back, you may question why people didn't leave at the first sign of discrimination. However, it is important to remember that nobody could have predicted what the Nazis were going to do, or that the Holocaust would take the form and reach the scale that it ultimately did.
In September 1941, Nazis started to take Jewish people away from Prague and sent them to a Nazi-established ghetto in Poland called Łódź. In November 1941, Jewish people began being sent to Terezin, another Nazi-established ghetto near Prague. Between 1942 and 1944, thousands of Jewish people were sent from Terezin to extermination camps in Poland. Like many other Czech Jews, Otto, Katerina and their daughter Ines were sent to Terezin in August 1942.
Otto's sister, Marie, and parents, Gustav and Gisela, followed almost a year later. They were then sent to and died in Auschwitz. Otto's brother, František, was sent to Terezin a few months later, and he was then sent to Auschwitz. However, he was not murdered immediately upon arrival, but sent to Dachau, the longest-running concentration camp in the Holocaust, where he died in March 1945. Otto, Katerina and Ines were due on a transport to Auschwitz at around the same time as František. However, before departure, Otto was made to stay and bury the bodies of those who had died in Terezin, and he later died there. Katerina and Ines were sent to Auschwitz, where they survived, and Katerina was sent to 2 other camps throughout the Holocaust, and ended up in Terezin, which was freed in May 1945.
Katerina and Ines were the only members of their immediate family to survive the war. They moved to Chile in an attempt to try and rebuild their lives. Ines went on to have her own family, who are today the grandchildren of Otto and Katerina. This was a massive loss in just one family, so we should take the time to consider the impact that such a loss would have had on countless others. During the Holocaust, the Nazis and their collaborators murdered 65% of Prague's Jewish population.
As we were leaving Auschwitz-Birkenau, we were encouraged to reflect on our experience. It was hard to imagine that we were standing at the site of a mass murder. However, being there in person and seeing in colour rather than the often black and white pictures that you see made it seem a lot more real. We learnt a lot from the Lessons from Auschwitz project, as well as from Otto and Katerina's story. The most important reflections that stuck with us were, first of all, that although it's easy to dismiss the Nazis as evil or mad, it's important to remember that they were humans who chose to take part in a genocide. If we dismiss them as monsters, then it means that the people who are to be blamed aren't being held to accountability.
The people to blame were not only those who committed murder, but those who helped the Nazis continue the genocide of Jewish people in any way. For example, railway employees sent Jewish people away from their homes, clerks took away belongings, managers arrested and rounded up Jewish people, and informants turned Jewish people into the authorities. Although these people didn't directly harm or kill Jews, their actions allowed the genocide to continue and allowed the Holocaust to reach the scale that it did.
The most important thing that we took from the Lessons from Auschwitz project was that it's important to remember the individuals behind the 6 million victims, as they led full and complex lives all across Europe, adding to their communities and enriching their cultures. We hope we have encouraged you to learn the stories behind the statistics and to take part in the Lessons from Auschwitz project if you get the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you to Iris and Trudy for their engaging presentation. Now we give a warm welcome to pupils from Lourdes Secondary School to share their insight through the readings on the theme For a Better Future.
As we gather for Holocaust Memorial Week, we remember the millions of lives lost in one of the darkest chapters of human history. Yet, as we honour the victims of the Holocaust, we also embrace the theme of a better future. This is not just a reflection on the past, but a call to action for the future. The Holocaust teaches us the stages of genocide, stages that start with small actions like classification and symbolisation, which divide people into us and them. Over time, these divisions deepened into discrimination, dehumanisation, and ultimately violence. We see how hatred can escalate from harmful words to horrific deeds. But even in the face of this darkness, there is hope. Hope comes from remembering these stages, from learning the warning signs and committing ourselves to act early before hatred can take root. Hope is in our ability to stand against discrimination, to challenge dehumanising language, and to create societies where differences are celebrated, not feared. Let us honour the survivors, the victims, and those who have spoken out by working together for a world that rejects violence and embraces peace. The lessons of the Holocaust are clear. Hope for the future is built on a collective commitment to justice, respect, and humanity.
Some might say 2025 isn't much different from the past. With technology and science evolving, the human race has stayed predictable. Regardless of the examples the past has set, society fails to learn its lesson. And today, a lot of anger is put on immigrants for simple reasons like culture clashing, religion, or just the colour of someone's skin. This is the same type of anger that was fueled by the anti-Semitic propaganda. Anti-immigrant propaganda is seen everywhere, on the news or articles or other sources of media. And due to this, some people use immigrants as scapegoats for their anger, similar to what happened in the past. Therefore, it's vital to have your own opinions that are educated and based on fact, rather than taking all news at face value. This prevents society from becoming brainwashed by false information and makes assimilation between all cultures easier. It's still important to understand the severity of genocides and why and how these things happen in order to break the cycle for our generations and the generations to come. Although we can't fix the past, there's always hope for a better future, and there is ways for society to reconcile so the past doesn't repeat itself.
Whilst we reflect on the past this Memorial Day, we should also think about our theme, our hope for the future. At a time where UK communities feel vulnerable, we must think about whether we keep the cycle going or take notice of the past to change the future of genocide. Learning so that we can intervene before escalation. For a better future, we must learn, speak, and act. But what does this future look like? A future of hope is one where we no longer live in a society where more people are killed by their own government than by wars combined. It is one where people don't dehumanise others based on racial superiority, populations aren't divided into us and them, and people stand up against racial hatred. To attain this, we need leaders who listen, empathise, and have the political will to intervene in the early stages of genocide, in order to avoid failing others, as the UN did to Bosnia, Darfur and Rwanda. A brighter future is one where we don't deny nor distort the tragedies suffered by victims of genocide, and where politicians don't give their support to the oppressors in a war of extermination.
Today we gather not just to discuss the past, but to confront a painful reality. The ongoing genocides that continue to plague our world. These atrocities remind us that the lessons of history are not just to think on, but are urgent calls to action. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in an era where such acts are not confined to the pages of history books, but are unfolding in real time. Across the globe, communities are being targeted for their identities, beliefs and cultures, whether it is the Rohingya in Myanmar, the Uyghurs in China, or the silent genocide in Nigeria. We witness a pattern of violence, persecution and dehumanisation. These groups are not just statistics, they are families, children and individuals with dreams and aspirations. Their suffering calls for our immediate attention and response. In this fight against genocide, we must also remember the power of storytelling. The voices of survivors must be amplified, their narratives shared, and their experiences honoured. It is through these stories that we can humanise the statistics and inspire others to help those in such situations. As we reflect on the ongoing genocides around the world, let us commit ourselves to action. Together, we can create a world where every individual is valued, where diversity is celebrated, and where the atrocities of genocide are relegated to the past. I urge you all to stand in solidarity with those who suffer. Let us be the voice of the voiceless and ensure that we do not continue to make the mistakes that we have previously made. Now, a question for the specifically P7s. Have you ever seen someone being picked on? And have you challenged it? Just reflect on that.
Scotland has always been a place where people care for each other and believe everyone deserves a chance to live a better life. Our history is full of stories about community, kindness and standing strong together. The Holocaust shows us what happens when people turn away from others in need. Millions died because they were denied safety and dignity. It is not just a story from the past. It's a reminder that we need to act with kindness today. We honour those who have suffered by helping others and refusing to ignore their pain. In Glasgow, groups like Refugee live by this idea. The name shows that anyone who comes to Glasgow is a part of the family. From welcome packages to events, they make sure refugees feel at home and never alone. Every time we welcome someone escaping danger or hardship, we show that they matter and that Scotland is a place of safety and care. This is who we are, a country that understands what it's like to struggle and chooses kindness over fear. Let's keep this spirit alive. Let's learn from the Holocaust, celebrate the work of groups like Refugee, and make Scotland a true home for anyone in need.
Within our lives and adolescence, our mothers are vital to us. This is through the support they show us, the unconditional love they give us, and more importantly, their ability to be able to put up with us. However, they would do anything for those they love, tending to put other issues before their own. That is why having an appreciation for our mothers is vital, as they shape who we are as a person, what we stand for, and help us create a moral compass within society to be able to tell right from wrong. That is why we, as a group, have found it essential to tell the story of Marina Subasic, a mother who lost her son and husband in the genocide of Srebrenica in 1995, and joined an organisation who had aimed to spread awareness for those who had lost their lives and support other mothers financially and emotionally who had also fallen victim to these atrocities by helping find the remains of those who had passed. The organisation is called Mothers of Srebrenica, and Marina Subasic claims that her role is, with the help of the United Nations, to advocate for those who have suffered, as well as telling her story to all that will listen, as it is important that it is never forgotten. I would like to leave you with some words from Marina Subasic. We do not hate, we remember. We educate the world on what happened so that no one else has to suffer like we did.
Thank you to Lord Secondary for your continued contribution and for enriching our event once again.
And now we would like to introduce Knightswood Secondary School performing a dance interpretation of the story of Anne Frank. thank you to all the performers from Knightswood Secondary School for their moving tribute to Anne Frank.
We would now like to turn our attention to the 30th anniversary of the Bosnian Genocide. Please join us in extending a warm welcome to Ava McLaren from Castlemilk High School as she extends our understanding of this event in history.
In July 1995, with the backdrop of the ongoing war, Bosnian Serb troops and paramilitaries led by Ratko Mladic descended on the town of Srebrenica and began shelling it. Around 8,000 Muslim men and boys over 12 years old were murdered in Srebrenica. After the Second World War, Bosnia was one of the 6 republics in the state of Yugoslavia. Marshal Tito ruled Yugoslavia from 1945 and succeeded in suppressing nationalist and ethnic tensions between the republics. However, following Tito's death in 1980, nationalist parties began to gain power in the republics, and in the early 1990s, Yugoslavia disintegrated into 6 states. When Bosnia declared independence in 1992, it soon descended into war. The population of Bosnia and Herzegovina consisted of Bosniaks who were Bosnian Muslims, Bosnian Serbs, Orthodox Christians who have close cultural ties with neighbouring Serbia, and Bosnian Croats, Roman Catholics who have close cultural ties with neighbouring Croatia. Bosnian independence was resisted by the Bosnian Serb Orthodox Christians, population who saw their future as part of Greater Serbia. Bosnia became the victim of the Bosnian Serbs' determined wish for political domination, which it was prepared to achieve by isolating ethnic groups and, if necessary, exterminating them. The Bosnian Serb resulted in the death of 100,000 people and the displacement of over 2 million men, women and children. A campaign of war crimes, ethnic cleansing and genocide was perpetrated by Bosnian Serb troops. In July 1995, Bosnian Serb troops and paramilitaries led by Ratko Mladic began shelling the town of Srebrenica. On July 11th, Ratko Mladic claimed Srebrenica for Bosnian Serb troops, the Orthodox Christians. On July 12th, the Bosnian Muslim men and boys over the age of 12 were forcibly separated from women and younger children who were deported on trucks and buses. By the end of the day, 5,000 women, children and elderly were deported by the Bosnian Serb troops. Over the next 30 hours, 23,000 people were deported. On the 13th of July, the systematic murder of the Bosnian men and boys left in Srebrenica began. Around 8,000 men and boys were murdered by Bosnian Serb forces. The UN described the events in Srebrenica as an act of genocide. The violence and killings beginning on 13th of July lasted at least 72 hours, when around 8,000 Bosniak Muslim men and boys were murdered in and around Srebrenica. Many were shot in the act of trying to escape. Their bodies were bulldozed into mass graves and concealed. The genocide at Srebrenica is the largest incidence of mass murder in Europe since World War II.
You know, we were attacked because we were Muslims, because it was a Serb plan to take this part of the country for themselves. So in that sense, what happened here was not personal. People who targeted me from the above. On the other hand, it was so personal when it came to the people who attacked us, because I recognized many soldiers, but of course many came from behind the hedge.
would like to briefly share with you the story of Kemal Pervinic. He and his family were Muslims living in Bosnia. Before the genocide in Bosnia, Kemal's school and community had been made up of Serb and Muslim people, and students who had worked and studied together. However, when the new authorities came into power, they began targeting the Muslim population. In 1992, Bosnian Serb forces imprisoned Kemal in the notorious Omarska concentration camp. The guards were made up of the Serb members of the community of the surrounding villages and towns. This meant that some of the guards in the camps were the neighbours and fellow students of Kemal. Kemal survived the camp and came to the UK shortly after they were released. With the help of British Red Cross, he was able to bring the rest of his family to the UK. Kemal and his family were fortunate to survive the genocide in Bosnia, as many thousands were murdered in that time. However, their lives were altered beyond recognition, arriving in the UK without their belongings or any special items. Kemal says, "People may think that they have nothing to do with my story, but what happened to me could happen to them, to people like yourself. It may sound too hard to believe, but this doesn't happen to strangers who live far away. I'm just an ordinary person. These terrible things can happen to people like us. We make the world the way it is, so just look around. Try to help those around you. Think before you do things, and take responsibility for your life."
A sincere thank you to Eva for sharing our understanding of the Bosnian genocide. Thank you for ensuring that we continue to remember this. We now turn our attention to a solemn moment as we welcome pupils from St Benedicts Primary School who will be lighting candles of remembrance. 11 candles will be lit to reflect the 11 million victims of the Holocaust, 6 million Jewish victims and 5 million non-Jewish victims. Please join us for a moment of reflection.
Thank you to St Benedict's Primary School for your thoughtful tribute. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Head of Service for Glasgow City Council, Mrs Jean Miller.
Thank you very much, and I know after me there's going to be lots of thank yous, but I do just want to begin by saying a huge thank you to all our children and young people who have been up on this stage this morning, because it's really difficult to come up here, and I think every single one of them has been fantastic at conveying such an important message. And I also want to say a huge thank you to the audience this morning, because equally you have been great at listening really, really well to all these messages, these really powerful messages. So I do want to say thank you to all of you as well. And today has been about history, some of it quite long ago, some of it quite recent. Now, I love history. When I was your age, I loved history. I loved history so much. I had great teachers at school that I went on to study history at university in Glasgow. And then I loved history at university so much I decided I would become a history teacher. And that's what I did a long time ago. I used to love being my history teacher in the classroom. And when I was studying history, one of the things that I studied was the Holocaust. And I have to be honest with you, when I was much younger, I really could never understand it. I could never understand how people could be so awful, so terrible to each other, how whole communities across Europe could stand by and allow mass murder to happen almost on their doorstep, and how people could just turn a blind eye to what was going on around them. I really couldn't understand it. After I started teaching, I had been teaching for 2 years, and I went off to Germany, and I taught children and young people in the armed forces, in the RAF and in the army. And it was really, really powerful being there and learning a lot more about what lives were like, often very difficult for young people who are there. And I made good friends, and every year I would go back and visit them. And many of those friends were soldiers, and the year I was there, it was 1992, and I left in 93, and as you heard earlier, the war in Bosnia had really just started. And many of them came back, and like many people who are often soldiers coming back, they find it very difficult to talk about their experiences. So they didn't do that very often, but when they did talk about them, they said that it was just terrible, it was awful, and the message that every single one of them kept saying is they had been there as peacekeepers, and what they saw was just terrible, because it was about communities turning against each other. It was about people who had been friends all their lives turning against each other. Neighbours, you think of your neighbours today, and all of a sudden these people didn't want to be neighbours anymore, and they didn't go on, and they turned against each other, and then also often did other things too. And we heard about the awful things that happened at Srebrenica, and the Lord Provost and I were just saying how much we remember that. And I remember seeing videos of young boys and their dads being shouted back to come into the woods. And it doesn't matter whether it was something more recent or something in the past, like the Holocaust. Over the years, I always found it more difficult to teach about the Holocaust, because I had children of my own at that time, and again thought about how could people do things like that. But sadly, I think it is about people through time. It's about turning a blind eye. It's about saying nothing when you see and you know something is wrong. In playgrounds, sometimes it's about going along with the crowd, even though you know it's not right. And it often starts by letting things that people say that are hurtful and cruel, and you know that they're not very kind, and you just let them pass by. And I know it can be very difficult at times to speak up. And if you can't speak up and feel that's too difficult, it's about saying maybe to an adult, to someone you know, and asking them to tell. Because it is the saying and the doing of nothing that leads to the bullies, the dictators, but also the ordinary people getting away with things we know are wrong. We need to call out people behaving badly, saying hurtful, terrible things, and doing terrible things when we see and we hear them. One of my favourite poems as a history teacher, and I used to always tell this poem to my classes when I was teaching the Holocaust, was written by someone called Pastor Martin Niemöller. He lived in Germany, and at the start he was a bit of a Nazi sympathiser too, and it wasn't until he was directly affected. He ended up in a concentration camp, and he realised how wrong he had been and how he should have spoken out from the very start. And he said, first they came for the communists, but I didn't speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for trade unionists, but I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. This morning, Castlemilk told us, silence is not an option. We then heard sung by the young people at St Timothy's, in a world of change, let's hope for a better future. And all our presenters and all our performances today have said that message. It's about learning what's happened, and all of us in this room, every single one of us, been responsible for a better future. And I know the children and young people and their teachers in Glasgow very, very well, and I know that that's something that we would all want to share. So let's all hope for a better future, and thank you.
A sincere thank you to Head of Service, Mrs Jean Miller, for sharing her valuable insight with us today. We greatly appreciate her presence and wealth of knowledge she has brought to this event.
As we conclude this Holocaust Memorial event, once again we thank you all of our participants in our schools for contributing today. Thank you to Mark Adams for organising this and arranging all of us being here today. We must become the generations who carry forward the legacy of the witnesses, remember those who were murdered, and challenge those who discriminate and persecute today.
We can all mark Holocaust Memorial Day 2025 and commit to making a better future for all. Can we please put our hands together to recognise the contribution of all involved today?